All right, I think we might get started. This couple still joining, but we'll get started anyway. All right, thank you so much for your interest in this subject. We hope that the session this afternoon gives you some great insights into citrus nutrition and why orange juice and citrus in general is good for our health. I think the research that Food IQ Global has done is fantastic and very timely for us as well. Fresh chilled juice, bottled or squeezed is an important part of the Australian citrus industry. And now is a time for us to change the conversation about juice and try and get people off of the negative connotations that they associate with juice and be more aware of the many nutritional benefits that we have in our product. There's a lot of myths and misperceptions about orange juice, and I hope, and I've heard this presentation before from Tim and worked with Tim and in the sidelines as they've uncovered this great research. And I think there's a lot of fantastic stories that the citrus industry would do really well to learn and be able to communicate to one another, but also most importantly to consumers out there. We host a lot of the material developed from these projects on our website, so please do go there to look for any resources. And I believe that Tim is going to make his slides available to us after the presentation. So I won't take up any more time. I want to say thank you to Olivia Tate for putting together today, and also for Tim for his presentation. And over to you, Tim Casateri from Food IQ Global.
Thanks so much, Nathan. Appreciate the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here. And thanks everyone for joining today for this session on becoming a juice ambassador. I wanted to start with a confession, and that is for 15 years working as a dietitian, I didn't actually drink juice, nor did I recommend it. And the reason came back to a time when I was actually a university student, sitting in the lecture theatre on a hot spring day. And my lecturer had a hypothesis that she put forward to all of us students. And that hypothesis was, you've probably heard it, that juice is high in sugar and low in fibre, and therefore it's easy to overconsume and could lead to weight gain. And now that rhetoric is widespread out there. And what we know now, based on the latest science, is that's not true. And there's amazing news stories about juice that are. And what we want to do today is to share those stories to help you to spread them throughout your friends and family and the wider community. So I want to start with a question for everyone, and you can use the chat function as we go, as well as the Q&A function as we go. So to make this an interactive webinar, I have a few questions to keep you engaged. So please, when we have a question, just type in your thoughts into the chat function. And if you have a question for me, we'll have a bit of time at the end to discuss. So just use the Q&A function to type those questions in at any point. So into the chat function, I'm keen to get your thoughts beyond vitamin C. What nutrition components in 100% juice can you name? Now, as you have a think about that and type it in, we did ask a question like this to health professionals recently. And what we found is that many of them know that juice is a source of vitamin C, but they actually struggle to name the nutrition components beyond vitamin C in juice. So this is something that at the end of today, we'll all be walking away with a sound grasp of, but keen to get your thoughts, what you know at the moment. Okay, so I just realized there's nothing coming through yet that I can see. So please, as we go, type in any thoughts you might have on the chat. But the chat's disabled. If anyone knows how to enable it. Anyway, we will work on that in the background, but we'll keep on going. So just have a think about your answer to this. You can write it down on a piece of paper in front of you. Oh, great. Chat's enabled now. So please continue as we go. But what we'll do for the agenda today is we'll do a Nutrition 101. So I want to give you a bit of a background about the basics of nutrition, so you have a solid understanding of where fruits, vegetables, citrus fruits and juice all fit into the bigger picture. We'll then dive into why citrus fruits specifically. We'll then look at the science of 100% juice, take you through some interactive scenarios, and then finish with the Q&A. So in terms of Nutrition 101, got another question for everyone, so you can please use the chat function for this. What food groups help to support good health? So thinking about, if you're thinking about a healthy diet, what are the food groups that you feel should be in there? So you can use the chat function to post any thoughts. Okay, so I still can't see the chat function, but I can see the Q&A function. But we'll go ahead with the core food groups. So essentially, what we know when we look across dietary guidelines across the world, although if you listen to nutrition advice in the media, there can be quite a bit of different opinions and information. All the international dietary guidelines and authoritative nutrition bodies, they all recommend the same types of core foods. And these foods aim to provide essential nutrients to the diet and support good health. And these food groups are vegetables and legumes. So legumes are beans like chickpeas and lentils, kidney beans, etc. Fruits, our grains, particularly whole or high fiber grains, are recommended. So that's there that your brown or your fibrous breads and breakfast cereals and rices and pastas, etc. Meats, so red meat or poultry or fish, or alternatives, which could be, it could also be legumes again, nuts, tofu, etc. And dairy and alternatives. So these are cheese, milk, and yogurt, as well as the plant-based alternatives of those. Now, these dietary guidelines across the world say that these core food groups are the foundations of a healthy diet, and there's some controversy within each one. So, for example, vegetables, there's some controversy around starchy vegetables like potatoes and whether they should be in there or not. For fruits, there's controversy around dried fruits and fruit juices. For grains, some controversy around our processed grains like breads and breakfast cereals and how much we should be eating. Meats and alternatives, some controversy around if it should be more meats or more the alternatives. And same with dairy, as well as the fat content of dairy, whether it should be low fat or full fat dairy. They're all parts of the controversies in each group, but overall at a high level, there's consensus that it's these food groups that make up the foundations of a healthy diet. They provide our essential nutrients, and they also help to support good health. And at an individual level, there's different types of diets that can fit within this. You could go for a lower carb diet with a bit less grains. You could go for a higher protein diet with a bit more meat, or you could do a plant-based diet with more focus on the alternatives, etc. So there's different diets at an individual level that fit within this, but overall, the core foundations are the same. Now, why vegetables and fruit? So when we look at these dietary guidelines, vegetables are recommended primarily because we know, and there's a lot of body of evidence to say that they're great for our heart health. So 2 ticks essentially means when we look at the confidence we have in the evidence, because we know not all scientific evidence is the same. Some evidence is more robust and stronger than others. When it comes to heart health, we're really confident in the role of vegetables for our hearts. And this is important because our heart disease is still the #1 killer in Australia today. They also can play a role in reducing some types of cancer risk and can also play a role in helping to manage our weights. And it's 5 serves per day of vegetables that are recommended. A serve of vegetables is 75 grams, and that's 375 grams each and every day as a minimum recommendation. For fruits, it's actually a really similar story. So again, when we look at the evidence, we're really confident that fruits have a strong role in our heart health. They also help to reduce the risk of some cancers, can help to manage weight. And although it's only 2 serves per day for fruit, it's important to note that 1 serve is 150 grams. So it's twice the size of a vegetable, and therefore we get 300 grams per day. So it's a similar number to vegetables. And in both fruits and vegetables, you can see similar health effects, provide similar nutrients, and some dietary guidelines actually group fruits and vegetables together in the same food group due to these similarities. Now, which food groups are Australians meeting the dietary recommendations for? So have a think about which ones of all those core food groups you feel Australians are meeting. And the answer is none of them. So we've got here all of the core foods. This one in circle is what Australians are currently consuming. The white square is how much is recommended. And you can see for each food group, we're actually falling short. What's interesting to note is discretionary food. So we haven't touched on these yet, but this is basically all the other foods that don't sit within these 5 core food groups. So this could be our processed meats, it could be our sugar sweetened beverages, our confectionery, our pastries and muffins, etc. All of these foods, we don't actually need them in the diet, although they can provide a role and be enjoyed and be tasteful. But essentially, we're eating far too much of these and not enough core food. So when we take a step back and we think about what's the core issue in the Australian diet, it is that we have this imbalance between core and discretionary, and it's really about shifting the intake away from discretionary towards core foods. Now that we've got the basics underway for nutrition, I want us to dive into why citrus fruits specifically. And I want to tell you a story going back to 1999, where a group of researchers from Harvard University were interested in the question, how do fruits and vegetables affect the risk of stroke? Now, stroke is part of our cardiovascular health. It's when we don't get enough blood flow to the brain due to blockages in particular key arteries that connect our body to our brain. And it's a very common illness in Australia, as well as around the world, particularly in Western countries. And they were interested, this is quite some time ago when cardiovascular health was really studied a lot in nutrition research. And they looked at some of the largest health sort of databases in terms of where people have been reporting what they eat. And what they found was for every additional serve of fruit or vegetable per day, people had a reduced risk of stroke. So they're less likely to get stroke. And that risk reduction was 6%. So if you can go from having sort of 2 serves to 3 serves of fruit and vegetables a day, or 4 serves to 5 serves of fruit and vegetables per day, you'll see a risk reduction over time in your stroke risk of 6%. So that's not really surprising given what we knew even back then. But what was surprising for the researchers is what they found next, because what they did is they looked at the individual types of fruits and vegetables. And what those researchers found was that there was one particular type of fruit that stood out, which was citrus fruits. And remarkably, every additional serve per day of citrus fruits was associated with a 19% reduced risk of stroke. They also looked specifically at orange juice, and there was actually a similar but greater association with orange juice specifically, where each serve was associated with a 25% reduced risk. So there's something interesting going on around citrus fruits, and research since this has confirmed that there's something unique about citrus fruits that is good for our cardiovascular systems. More recently, another group of researchers, also from Harvard, mined through the similar data, but they were looking at cognitive function. So what we've seen in nutrition science is we've seen more focus on the role of foods on our brain health. Typically, for a long time, we knew that foods affected sort of what was happening below the neck, in terms of our cardiovascular system, our metabolic system. But it's only more recently where we started to appreciate the importance of what we eat for our brain health. And we know that when we get older, what happens is our cognitive function starts to decline. So our thinking and memory skills get worse. And that can lead to diseases such as dementia, which is very common. It's a leading cause of disease burden in Australia. And we're starting to discover the important role of nutrition in reducing these diseases. So what these researchers did is they then asked a similar question. How do fruits and vegetables affect cognitive decline? And what they found was fruits can have a role. So when we eat more fruits, as well as vegetables, we can see a reduction in our risk of cognitive decline. And one serve of fruits was associated with an 8% reduced risk. And that, again, wasn't that surprising to these researchers. But what they found next was, because they did the same analysis where they looked at specific types of fruits. Citrus fruits, we saw a 10% reduced risk. So there seems to be something about citrus fruits that seems to be important for cognitive function. And interestingly, orange juice was the standout of any type of fruit or vegetable in this entire study. And it almost, or just over halved the odds of having poor cognitive function in older adults. So it's interesting now to ask ourselves, so what are the nutrition components that are responsible for the heart and brain benefits of citrus fruits? So I want you to go back to your list that you wrote at the start around what nutritional components are in citrus fruits or juice, and have a think about what they might be. So in order to answer that question, I'm going to just keep you holding for a bit longer. I want to do an overview in terms of what's actually in foods generally that is leading to the health effects of food, and then we'll dive into what's in citrus specifically. So when we think about food specifically, and what makes them healthy or unhealthy, the obvious answer that everyone probably knows is the macronutrients. So we know we've been doing a lot of research on this in nutrition in terms of macronutrients. These includes carbohydrates, of which sugar and starch are types of carbohydrates, fats, protein, fiber. These are well known. This is typically what people focus on. You'll see these on the nutrition information panel on foods, and these are things that inform our health star rating. But we also know from research that macronutrients alone do not account for the overall health effects of food. There's actually a lot more going on. So one of those is micronutrients. So these are our vitamins and minerals. So these are smaller in size, but also very important. And we know that there's a lot of nutritional deficiencies in the Australian diet today, and we're simply not getting enough of many micronutrients. So we did an analysis recently looking at over 30 of these macronutrients in the Australian diet and New Zealand diet, and 20 of them were not being consumed at adequate levels. So micronutrients are important, and we need to help people eating more of those. But we also know there's more to it than just macro and micronutrients, and that bioactives are another key component in foods. So bioactives are nutritional components that don't have a recommended daily intake, but they do have an important effect on our health. So if you created a food that was nutritionally balanced and had all of your RDI micronutrients in exact levels, you wouldn't be, and you ate that every day, you wouldn't be deficient in anything. You wouldn't develop any nutritional deficiencies, but you wouldn't achieve optimal health. So these bioactives, these can feed our gut bacteria, which we know is important for improving optimal health. They can also have anti-inflammatory or antioxidant effects. And some of the key types are polyphenols and carotenoids. There's actually a lot though. So while there was, we've got 30 odd micronutrients, we've got over 20,000 different bioactives. So there's a huge number and diversity of bioactives in the diet. Plant-based foods are known for being rich in these, and they can give plant foods their vibrant colors in fruits and vegetables. And the main type, although there's lots of different types, the main type is polyphenols, and within polyphenols, the main type is flavonoids. So if you've ever heard of the word flavonoids, that's the main type of polyphenols. There's also processing and additives. And what we now know, so we've known about macro and micronutrients for a long time. Bioactives and processing is things we're still understanding, and there's still lots to understand. But we know that you can have two foods that have the same nutritional composition, but can have different health effects. And this can be due to differences in processing and additives. So for example, if you add an artificial sweetener to water, that water, although the nutrition content can be the same, its health effects can differ. Similarly, some types of processing can keep the nutrition content the same, but change how it affects the body. Even simple things like rolled oats, we know are digested quite slowly in the body. And if you make instant oats, due to the way you're changing the structure of the grain, it's actually digested in the body differently, and we'll see a blood sugar spike after eating the instant oats compared to the rolled oats. It's also important to note, though, that some processing can be beneficial. We know, for example, that when we take milk and turn that into yogurt and cheese, it undergoes a fermenting process that produces probiotics. So these are bacteria that can then go into our gut and have positive health effects. So processing can be both positive and negative. And we also have nutritional synergy. And nutritional synergy essentially says that how these things are not just working in isolation, they're also interacting with each other in this complex way. And just because you're getting a food that might tick a lot of nutrition boxes, similar to if you're creating a sort of champion sports team, we know that just bringing in some high-profile players doesn't necessarily mean the teams are going to be the best team. It's also about how they work together and everything. And that's what nutritional synergy is about. It's saying that these things work together, and it's how they work together that influence the health effects, not just looking at them alone in isolation. We've also got the chat fixed, so feel free to use the chat going forward. Thanks, everyone. So going back to our question, what's in citrus fruits that could be explaining these remarkable benefits with regards to our cardiovascular system and also our brains? So when we dive through each of these buckets, we've got our macronutrients, and we know that citrus fruits contain sugar, also some fiber. When we turn those into juices, some of that fiber is lost, although there's still some fiber there in the juice. We've got micronutrients. These include vitamin C, B vitamins, magnesium, folate, and potassium. And we know when we turn citrus fruits into juice, the micronutrient profiles tend to be quite comparable between the two. But we've also got bioactives, polyphenols and carotenoids as well in our citrus fruits and also our citrus juices. And interestingly, our citrus juices, due to the way they're made, can actually have higher amounts of some of these bioactives, like carotenoids, than our citrus fruits, because often the whole fruit can be used in the making of the juice. And we've also, keeping in mind the processing additives, we know that citrus fruits and the juices, when it's 100% juice, they're minimally processed with no additives as well. And we also got this incredible nutritional synergy, which we see in a lot of our whole foods. So in juice and in citrus fruits, we actually know that these things are interacting together. And one example is the polyphenols. These polyphenols actually act to reduce the digestion and absorption of the sugars in citrus fruits. And we know that whether it's a whole citrus fruit or a citrus juice, that blood sugar response is a low, steady blood sugar response, and it's comparable between whole fruits and juice. And we think that that's in part due to these polyphenols interacting in this nutritional synergy way with the sugars. So what is it though in these citrus fruits that's having these benefits? Well, if you think about it, all of these things can be playing a role and they all work together, but many of them are actually, we see these in other fruits and vegetables as well. So many of these micronutrients, these macronutrients, some of the bioactives, and the fact they're minimally processed, this is no different to what we would see in other fruits. What's interesting is that citrus fruits contain some really unique types of flavonoids. So these are the main types of polyphenols, which are our bioactives. They're found in citrus fruits and citrus juices. And two key ones are hesperogen and naringenin. And these flavonoids are not found in any other foods. They're unique to citrus. And what we know is that these bioactives act as prebiotics. So they feed our gut bacteria. And we know that citrus fruits and orange juice actually have a prebiotic effect. So they're actually feeding our good gut bacteria, making them grow more. And this has a wider systemic effect on our body. So our gut chats to our brain. And we know that these flavonoids can increase blood flow to the brain. And they can actually, some of them cross the blood-brain barrier, which is the barrier between the brain and the rest of our body. And they can localize in the brain and actually have a positive effect on some of our brain proteins. And this is one of the reasons why we think we see such incredible benefits for our citrus fruits and juices when it comes to our brain health. We also know that although we can have long-term benefits when it comes to our brain health, there's also evidence to show immediate benefits. So within as little as a couple of hours, we can see improvements after drinking orange juice to our markers of cognitive function. So we can think with more clarity, I have quicker processing time, etc., in our minds after consuming juice. What's more is they also act on our cardiovascular system. So they have quite incredible antioxidant effects, anti-inflammatory effects. So they reduce the inflammation in our body. And due to our lifestyles, many people have what we call this chronic inflammation going on. So this low-grade chronic inflammation that over time can lead to chronic diseases. And we know that that juice and fruits can actually lower those markers of inflammation in the body. They can also have effects on cholesterol, blood pressure, etc. So these bioactives, they don't work in isolation. If you were just to extract them and put them in a supplement, you wouldn't get the same benefit because citrus fruits and their juices contain this unique package that contains them, but also has our vitamins and minerals and nutritional synergy. So it's all these things we think that are working together to lead to these remarkable benefits around our guts, our health, our brain health, and our cardiovascular health. And what we're seeing with this new way of thinking about foods and how they affect our health is this evolution in nutrition. So when you think about all of those factors that affect our health, you can probably start to understand that if you just zoom in on one thing, like if you just zoomed in on sugar or just zoomed in on saturated fats, you may misinterpret or misclassify the health effects of the food because there's so many other things going on. And we see this quite a bit where people might look at these complex foods that are rich in micronutrients, bioactives, and minimally processed, yet they might be high in saturated fat, or they might be high in sugar, or they might be high in cholesterol. People say, oh, it's high in sugar or it's high in saturated fat, must be bad for you. But they're not taking into account all of these bioactives, micronutrients, processing, and nutritional synergy. And that's one of the limitations we have with health star rating. We know it works quite well for many foods, but for our sort of minimally processed, bioactive rich, micronutrient rich foods that are high in a sugar or saturated fat or something, because the health star rating system only focuses in on macronutrients, it can score those foods quite lowly. And we see an example with juice, actually. Juice can score less than artificially sweetened beverages because the artificially sweetened beverages have less sugar than the juice, but actually they contain artificial sweeteners, they're more processed, and that's not taken into account for the health stars, and the bioactives and the micronutrients are not taken into account with the health stars either. And what we're seeing is back in the day, if you zoom back to the 1980s, everyone thought that eggs were bad for our hearts because they're high in cholesterol. And modern nutritional research has shown that actually that's not true. Eggs can support heart health and be part of a healthy diet because they contain all these other things. Similarly, nuts were seen as bad for our weight because they're high in fat and calories. And more recent research shows that they're actually very healthful and don't negatively impact weight. And that's in part due to all of these other things in the nuts that are going on. And very recently, we've seen this movement away from recommending just low-fat dairy to also including full-fat dairy for our heart. And because even though our full-fat dairy products are high in saturated fat, they have all these other things that help to interact with the saturated fat and means the overall effect on our heart health is positive. So what we wanted to ask as researchers is, could something similar be happening with juice? People often say, well, juice is high in sugar, it's bad for your health, but actually, given what we now know about the complexity of foods and all these other parts in 100% juice, could they actually be having a role in health like those other foods do? And this, we did a paper asking this question where we looked at, it's the biggest review ever done on 100% juice and health outcomes. We looked at all of the highest level evidence, looking at 100% juice effect on health, and wanted to understand the overall balance of evidence and does it favor benefit or risk more. And this research was funded by Ozveg and Hort Innovation with the Citrus Fund, but it was carried out independently by our colleagues at Food IQ Global using best practice guidelines to minimize bias. And what did we find? So some of the key research questions we wanted to know is, how does 100% juice impact our cardiovascular system, knowing that fruit and vegetables do? How does 100% juice fare? How does 100% juice impact weight, knowing that fruits and vegetables can be good for our weight, but many people are saying juice is bad for our weight. Is that true? How does 100% juice impact other health outcomes like diabetes and cancer risk? And how does 100% juice impact dental health? We hear a lot of noise around juice being bad for our teeth. What does the science say about that? So for our first question, how does it affect heart health? What we did is we rated the quality of the evidence, and this one got 2 ticks because not only was 100% juice good for our heart health, the evidence was strong. So we were really confident in this evidence, showing that juice has lots of benefits to our heart health. So we found that it lowers blood pressure, which is the leading cause of disease burden in the world, because it leads to heart disease and stroke. We found that it lowers markers of inflammation, which we talked about before. We found that people can die of stroke at a lower rate if they consume more 100% juice. So we found lots and lots of benefits around cardiovascular health. And what's interesting was that juice, 100% juice, can be high in sugar, and we know that sugar-sweetened beverages are actually bad for our heart health. So what this tells us is that there's obviously all these other components in juice are having a role in our heart health, and it means that looking at the sugar content is not the right way to go about it. If we want to understand how juice is affecting our heart health, we need to not think about sugar and compare it to sugar-sweetened beverages. We need to think about all those other factors, these bioactives, these micronutrients, its processing, etc. Our second question was about how it affected weight. And this was the one that probably surprised me the most. I think I knew that it would improve cardiovascular health, but I was surprised about its effect on weight. So there was over 20 studies done that were well-controlled studies that looked at 100% juice in weight. And every single study, and many of these compared juice to water or non-caloric beverages, so with no calories, and every study found no effect on weight. Now, this is interesting because it's not what we hear in the media, but when we looked at all the studies that are showing or that the media are reporting on when it comes to juice and weight, none of those studies were confident that it's 100% juice. So they're either grouping juices with sugar sweetened beverages, or maybe they're measuring juice intake in a way where it's not clear if it's 100% juice being consumed. So that's an important thing to keep in mind when you're hearing nutrition stories about juice and weight in the media. The third question was how it's associated with other outcomes like type 2 diabetes and prostate cancer. And we actually found that 100% juice was associated with a very small but increased risk with type 2 diabetes and prostate cancer. So what this means is that there was some studies that reported a higher increase in these outcomes. Now those associations are very small. So it was about 3% higher risk of prostate cancer and 7% risk of type 2 diabetes. These are very small associations. And when we rated the confidence of evidence, it was very low quality evidence. So we weren't super confident in these results. And what was interesting is that this was all of the studies done where they just asked people, how much 100% juice are you drinking, and tracking them over time. All of the studies that actually gave people 100% juice in a controlled manner, they didn't report any negative health outcomes and no negative effects or markers of type 2 diabetes. So that's why it's a cross and a question mark, because there was some mixed data around these outcomes. And finally, around dental health, we actually found no high quality evidence, no high level evidence that we could include in our paper on 100% juice in dental health. So there simply wasn't evidence that was strong enough to include in any way at all. So we didn't have any data saying it's good for dental health or bad for dental health. So I want to dive into some of the intricacies of these results because there's some interesting findings in here. And the first is I just want to discuss in a bit more depth what we were saying about the different types of research studies in nutrition. So essentially, there's two main types of studies, and both of these types were included in our review. One is the type of study, it's called an intervention study. It's where you divide everyone in your room into two groups. You give half of them 100% juice and half of them, you give them a control. You might give them water or something to compare it to. And in these types of studies, 100% juice always either was the same as the control or was better than the control. In no study whatsoever was there any harmful effects to 100% juice. And in these studies, we know that participants are getting 100% juice because it's the researchers that are looking at the product and giving it to these researchers, and everything else is being controlled. The problem with those studies is they're really expensive to do, and it's difficult to get people to have the same intervention and control everything else for years and years and years. So they only can last for a certain period of time. The longest was about 18 months in our study. So we also look at the longer term studies, which are observational studies. So that's where we don't intervene at all. And the researchers just say, we're going to observe what's going on in the room. And we're just going to ask you, how often do you drink 100% juice? And track you over time and see if the people that reported drinking more 100% juice had more risk of disease over time. And it was those studies where we did find some of those health risks, although the quality of evidence is very low. And one thing we wanted to note is in the intervention studies, we can be really confident that the people that are given 100% juice are having 100% juice. But for the observational studies, how confident can we be that those subjects that are saying, oh yeah, I'm drinking 100% juice lots actually are? And to bring this to life, here's a range of juices that you might see in the supermarket. Now, if you think about the average person that's participating in these research studies that isn't educated in nutrition, how many of them actually know what 100% juice is? Because that is, it's just 100% juice and nothing else. My prediction is not very many. So to give you an idea, these ones with the ticks are 100% juices. The other ones with crosses are not quite 100% juices. They've got other things added. And I have a story actually from my flatmate who I was telling about the research of 100% juice and making it clear about the exciting benefits of 100% juice to him. And I said, oh, we have to start having 100% juice. And he's like, oh, 100% juice, what's that? And I was in a bit of a rush and I sort of mentioned, oh, 100% juice, no additives. Look for the one with no additives. So he went to the shops, he came back very proud. It was actually this product here that he came back with. And this product here says no artificial colors, flavors, or preservatives. So he's like, I've got it. I've got the 100% juice, no additives. And we looked at the back of the pack and it's actually a fruit drink. And this is the ingredients list. And you can see here that the proportion of actual fruit juice is quite low, and it's that fruit juice that is providing all those micronutrients and bioactives that are beneficial for our health. And most of these is diluted with the water. It's also got some other additives here. So it's a clear example of how people can be saying they're having 100% juice, but not quite. And that's why we need to question some of what we hear in the media around research around juice when it's from observational research. Regarding dental health, so as I mentioned, we didn't find any evidence on dental health. We know that it's high, that it contains sugar and it can be acidic, but we also know that it can contain some positive nutrients that are good for our teeth as well and good for our gums. So given that, and given we don't have high level evidence to know one way or another, instead of just saying, oh, juice is bad for your teeth, don't have it, it's better to help people to recommend different ways you can have juice to help protect your teeth. Because we know that there's lots of foods in the diet that contain sugar, lots of foods in the diet that contain acid. It's not about avoiding all those foods altogether. It's just about having them in a way that promotes good dental health. So some tips for juice is practicing good dental hygiene. So that's regular teeth brushing, flossing, and visiting your dentist for cleans. Is an important thing to do in the background. Also, the time you have juice. So if you have it with meals, you're actually reducing the acidic exposure of the juice. Maybe having it in between meals. And similarly, if you're having it more in one go, as opposed to sipping it across the day, that will reduce your acidic exposure. You can also have juice with a straw, which will help to minimize the acidic contact with your teeth. You can have water after your juice to help negate the acids as well. And important to wait 30 minutes after drinking juice before cleaning your teeth, because if you do clean your teeth straight away after having juice, you can wear away some of your enamel. So if we have juice in that context, then we know that we can get all those amazing health benefits of juice while helping to protect our teeth. So what we've been doing is instead of the rhetoric around juice is bad for health because of sugar and high sugar, low fiber, we've actually been progressing the juice conversation. And a few ways we've been doing this, we've been saying we need to not just think about harm, we need to think about the overall balance of evidence where we see more benefit than harm, and how we can use juice in a way that achieves these health outcomes around reduction in blood pressure and supporting our brain and cardiovascular systems. Also helping people to select 100% juice. So instead of just blanket statements around juice is too high in sugar, how can we help people to select juice products where the proportion of juice is higher? How to consume 100% juice. So that comes back to some of the tips around that we just mentioned around keeping in mind having it in a way that supports good dental health, as opposed to just saying it's bad for our teeth. And also the importance of context. So what this means is essentially everyone's different, and juice can have different roles for different people's diets. So if, for example, you are out at dinner at a restaurant, it doesn't make sense and you're feeling thirsty, to have a whole fruit instead of juice. Of course, juice makes more sense in that context. But it's also more than that. So we did a study where we looked at the nutrition density to cost ratio of foods. And what we did is we scored a whole bunch of foods, all of the foods that people eat, based on their nutritional profile. So looking at the macro and micronutrients. We also looked at the cost of those foods. And we did this formula where we calculated the nutrient score to cost ratio. And the food that was number one by far for giving you the most nutrition for the minimum amount of money, so more nutrition for your dollar, was actually fruit juices. And given the cost of living crisis we've got going on, that there's this important role for juice in many people's diets. Beyond just delivering these amazing health benefits, it can also help people to get more nutrition for less money. Okay, so now what I want us to do is putting all of that knowledge into action. We've got a few scenarios that we'll walk through together, and you should be able to use the chat function for this. So our first scenario is walking with Robert. So I want you to imagine you are a regular at your Saturday morning walk club, and you have found yourself chatting to another regular, Robert. Robert tells you about his health goals for the new year, including that he wants to change his diet to improve his overall health, but complains about the cost of healthy foods. And you mentioned juice as an affordable source of nutrition, but he says, oh, isn't juice too high in sugars and low in fiber? How do you respond? So I'd love the chat should be working now. So I'd love any initial thoughts that anyone has, how they might respond to Robert in the chat. Love it. We've got juice is so good for you. Keep them coming. Any others? Okay, so how we might respond to Robert with the too high in sugars. Well, we know that just like eggs, that our understanding today has evolved around juice, and we should not judge juice just based on one nutrient. So we know that 100% juice is minimally processed. We also know that it contains many positive nutrients that support good health. And for low in fiber, well, we know that 100% juices contain other gut-friendly nutritional components, those bioactives. And we also know that for a drink, it actually is more fiber than most other drinks you'll find. So we've got another answer as well around its role in dementia, and that it's natural sugars. All great points. There's lots of different potential answers to these. I'd love to see those answers coming through. Okay, our second scenario. So this is a dinner party with Jade. So you're at a dinner party with friends when you're introduced to a new person in the group called Jade, who is a health enthusiast. So finding out about what you do for your job, Jade is curious to learn more about juice. So she asks that, well, I've heard that juice makes you gain weight, and isn't whole fruit best? So how would you respond? I'll give you a little bit of time to have a think, or you can put any responses on the chat. Love it. So we've got whole fruit is great, and so is juice. Proven that drinking 100% juice doesn't contribute to weight gain. Whole fruit is best, sometimes not an option. All really great points. So if it makes you gain weight, we know that there are over 20 studies where 100% juice is being consumed, and weight gain was not reported in any of those. And whenever it's in the media that juice makes you gain weight, it's always from studies that are unable to say with confidence that it's 100% juice being consumed. Whole fruit is best. So absolutely agree, whole fruit is fantastic. We want people to be having whole fruit, but we also have to keep in mind that it's not always as simple as, oh, do I just have juice or fruit? Imagine, for example, you're at this dinner party, you're feeling thirsty, you're offered a glass of juice and a piece of fruit. It doesn't make sense necessarily to compare the two. And we know that juice has a different need. It helps, it's a drink, it's a beverage, it's a nutritious drink, and it also helps people to increase total fruit intake, which we know is low. So some great answers coming through as well. So whole fruit gives the higher unprocessed fibers than juice, which is true. And juice can also provide some more bioactives than fruit. So both can have a role in the diet. And we also know that sometimes it's difficult to get people to eat fruit. So juice can be an option as well. So the third scenario is a family barbecue with Aunt Fee. So you are at a family barbecue and chatting with with your family members, including Aunt Fee. During your conversation, the host shouts over at your group and asks, would anyone like a glass of juice? Your Aunt Fee, while holding a glass of wine, makes a comment that fruit juice is bad for teeth and that water would be a better choice. How do you respond? Love all the answers coming through. Thanks, everyone. Any ideas for how you'd respond with Aunt B? SP loves their wine as well. A quick rinse with water afterwards and you'll be sweet. Juice isn't bad for you. All great responses. So a couple of other thoughts. So we know for teeth that evidence is limited. The juice also contains many nutrients that are important for good health, but good dental health. But at the end of the day, when it comes to 100% juice, you don't have to give it up. We can just think about how we drink it, and we've got some great suggestions coming through already. And water is best. So water is great, but we know that the leading sources of those bioactives in the diet, those polyphenols, actually are tea, coffee, and orange juice. And what they all have in common is they're all beverages. So we know that water should be encouraged, of course, but we don't just have to drink water because water doesn't have much nutrients. And we already know that we're all struggling to get enough nutrients from bioactives into our diet. Relying just on foods alone makes it even tougher. And dietary guidelines say that we can drink a range of drinks alongside water. So fruit and vegetable juices, with no added sugars. We've also got milks, teas and coffees. These are all very nutritious drinks that can be consumed alongside water that help us to have more of these important bioactives and micronutrients. So I just want to go back to the story I shared at the start. 15 years or more than 15 years ago with regards to my university lecturer who had that hypothesis around juice. And we've actually been sharing our research with a whole bunch of key stakeholders, health professionals, and we actually emailed our paper to this lecturer. She's a prominent academic, and she wrote back saying, thank you so much for this paper. I've always thought that the way people talk about 100% juice doesn't affect the research, and I will cite this paper going forward. So we've been able to help change her mind as well as many others through sharing these stories. And I think there's a fantastic role for fruits and juices in supporting our health. And it's up to all of us to help correct that misinformation and share these positive nutritional stories around juice. And I hope that everyone today feels more empowered to be a juice ambassador and help share those stories. So we have now a bit of time for questions. So if you have any questions at all on anything we've discussed, please do use the Q&A and we can answer those. And while we're doing that, I'll also put this screen up. So this is our health hub on the Citrus Australia website. We'll send this out afterwards via email as well as some key resources, but you can use this QR code now as well to access that website and read a range of resources around the role of citrus fruits and juices on health. Okay, so we've got one comment coming in from John. Thanks, John. Around fruit sugars and not all processed sugars. There are different types and forms of sugars, and fruit is not all sucrose. These have different roles in the diet, and that's a great point. So we didn't go into the specifics of it all, but we talked about how we can't just look at sugars. We need to think about what else is in the food, how it's processed, and we can also look at the type of sugars too. And it's correct that natural sugars and added sugars can be different. So natural sugars can come alongside many different nutrients, bioactives, etc., and added sugars do not. And they can have different health effects. So thanks, John, for making that point. Okay, we've got no more questions. So I want to say a big thank you, everyone, for your time today and for learning about juice, and looking forward to working with you to be juice ambassadors going forward and to spread the science of juice and fruits and citrus fruits and health. Thanks, everyone.